Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. India is playing host to the German Chancellor as Berlin looks to reduce its dependence on China. It's turning to India. We'll take a closer look at this relationship and analyze the big picture. From the G7 to the Quad and the Quad to the BRICS and the SCO, from visiting Russia on Tuesday to hosting the German leader on Friday, how Prime Minister Modi is in a unique position geopolitically and how India can capitalize on that. In Bangladesh, there's talk of banning Sheikh Hasina's party, the Awami League. We'll tell you why. On the India-China border, troops are being pulled back from the last flashpoints after the disengagement deal was announced. In the UK, the old question of reparations, former colonies corner King Charles on paying back for slavery. In the US, it's the battle of stars in the run-up to the presidential election. In India, the festive season has not been able to revive demand as expected. Some business leaders say the middle class is shrinking. We'll examine the data. Is Russia helping the Houthis in Yemen as they target global shipping? In France, a rare case has shaken the country and exposed the society. And what is India's 1,000 crore rupee fund for space startups? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Ukraine claims Russia will deploy North Korean troops in combat as early as Sunday. North Korea says any troop deployment to Russia will be in line with international law. This comes as Moscow moves to ratify its defense treaty with Pyongyang. The pact provides for mutual assistance if either party faces aggression. South Korea expresses concern over this, what they call illegal cooperation. The Kremlin denies reports of secret talks between Vladimir Putin and Elon Musk. A Wall Street Journal report claims the two have been in regular contact since 2022. It also alleges that Putin asked Musk to not activate his Starlink service over Taiwan as a favor to Chinese President Xi Jinping. Protests in Mozambique turned violent after the ruling party's re-election. Hundreds of opposition supporters take to the streets in the capital. They claim that the election has been rigged. The protesters clashed with the police and blocked the roads. The Frelimo party has been in power in Mozambique for almost half a century. Bulgaria to hold its 7th election in less than 4 years on Sunday. It has been plagued by unrest since 2021. The last election was held in June, but no party could form a stable government. Bulgaria is the poorest nation in the European Union. And Pakistan's second largest city, Lahore, battles hazardous smog levels. School children banned from outdoor activities till January. Just days ago, Lahore was declared the most polluted city in the world. According to UNICEF, nearly 600 million children in South Asia are exposed to high levels of air pollution.
Today, we are meeting in the world's biggest democracy, the fastest growing major economy in the world.
Olaf Scholz is visiting India. That's the German Chancellor. He landed in New Delhi last night and the timing is significant. For the last couple of weeks, Canada has dominated headlines with Justin Trudeau defending Khalistani terrorists, making baseless charges against India and trying to rally the West. Trudeau was hoping to isolate India with the help of his Western friends. But look how it's playing out. The German leader's visit underscores how misplaced those efforts were. Olaf Scholz has joined a growing list of world leaders who are eager to deepen their relationship with India. Unlike Trudeau, Scholz is not myopic. He wants more trade with India. He wants to deepen strategic ties. He wants India's help to tackle China and to keep the Indo-Pacific open and safe. Scholz is also seeking India's help in ending the Ukraine war.
I expressly support India advocating a lasting and just peace. And I am glad of its readiness to use its reliable relations with all parties to contribute to a political solution of the conflict.
Olaf Scholz made that statement earlier today when he met the Indian Prime Minister for talks. The German leader has come with a large delegation of ministers and executives. He is planning a significant pivot. Last week, Germany rolled out a new strategy. It is called Focus on India. The plan describes how Germany should elevate ties with India, and that is the reason why Scholz is visiting. He is here to make that pivot. A slew of agreements were signed today, covering a wide range of areas from defense to information technology, clean energy, skill development, also emerging fields like semiconductors and AI. India's Prime Minister said a new blueprint will guide this partnership.
जर्मनी की फोकस ऑन इंडिया स्ट्रैटेजी के लिए मैं चांसलर शोल्ज का अभिनंदन करता हूं। इसमें विश्व के दो बड़े लोकतंत्रों के बीच पार्टनरशिप को कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव तरीके से मॉडर्नाइज और एलिवेट करने का ब्लूप्रिंट है।
So India and Germany are giving their relationship a makeover of sorts. Defense is a major area of cooperation now. Berlin is open to selling defense equipment to India. Before Scholz arrived, Germany made an announcement. It is extending a special status to India. This is supposed to expedite military purchases. It could facilitate a submarine deal. New Delhi may buy 6 German subs. They could be made here in India. Military cooperation is also expanding. Olaf Scholz will travel to Goa tomorrow to visit a German frigate and a supply ship. This German fleet is here for a joint maneuver with the Indian Navy. Militaries from both sides have been engaging in joint drills. What do you think is driving all of this? China's growing acts of aggression, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. Olaf Scholz said that India and Germany will work together and protect major maritime routes.
I am very much looking forward to welcoming the soldiers to Goa tomorrow. The Bundeswehr is also committed to ensuring that the rules-based international order is upheld in the Pacific. The freedom of maritime trade routes applies everywhere.
China is also an issue on the trade front. Germany wants to be less dependent on China. Their list of Chinese imports is quite long. It includes raw materials and a number of essential goods like chemicals, computers, and solar cells, even pharmaceuticals and rare earth materials. There are some 200 products on this list where Germany cannot do without China. 200 products. Clearly, this is a problem for Berlin. It wants to reduce its dependency on China, and for this, Chancellor Scholz wants India's help. He is pushing for an EU-India free trade deal.
My government is pushing for swift progress and rapid conclusions, and I'm sure that if we work on together on this, Prime Minister, this could happen in months rather than years.
To boost trade and business, Chancellor Scholz is making some changes. Germany will now offer more visas to Indian workers. The annual quota for Indians is being raised. Earlier it was 20,000, now it will be 90,000, 90. So Germany will issue visas to 90,000 Indian workers every year. Evidently, Olaf Scholz is doing his bit to woo India. And it is a partnership with great potential. India and Germany, they have much to offer to each other. But both sides have struggled to achieve tangible results. Scholz's visit brings fresh momentum to these efforts. He has certainly struck the right tone. It remains to be seen where they take it from here. Look at the timing of this meeting, right after Prime Minister Modi returned from Russia. On Wednesday, he was hugging Vladimir Putin. On Friday, he was shaking hands with Olaf Scholz. How many leaders can do that? Very few, if any. So tonight, we are looking at India's position in the world. What makes it unique? How did India reach here? And how can we capitalize on it? First of all, India's position is a sweet spot. When it comes to the key players in the world, we have issues, but not conflicts. We have friends, but not alliance commitments. We have rivals, but not enemies. And that is the ultimate goal in foreign policy. Just consider the second half of this year. In June, Prime Minister Modi traveled to Italy. The West had invited him to the G7 summit. In July, he traveled to Russia, had the whole controversial hug with Putin. In August, he visited Ukraine, expressed solidarity with Zelensky in Kiev. In September, he traveled to the US, met President Biden in Wilmington, also attended the Quad summit with Japan and Australia. Then in October, he returned to Russia. this time to attend the BRICS summit. And immediately after that, he hosted the German Chancellor in New Delhi. Just look at the breadth of engagement. Hugging Putin in Moscow, then consoling Zelensky in Kiev, attending a Quad summit in the US, then striking a border deal to reset ties with China, speaking to Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone, then meeting the presidents of Palestine and Iran. Not only are these countries speaking to India, they're actively seeking India's support. This is a sweet spot that I was talking about. Everyone wants to be friends with India, everyone minus Canada and Pakistan. But India can afford to ignore Pakistan. It can also afford to openly take on China. Do you know why? Because of this positioning. Imagine if Justin Trudeau had made such accusations against another country. Had he done so, chances are the West would have closed ranks. But because it's India, it is Trudeau who's isolated, not India. All he got was a customary statement of support, no actions to back it up. Which brings us to our second question. How did India reach this position? Mainly because of three factors. Number one, the economic rise. India has the 5th largest GDP in the world. It is also the most populous country in the world, meaning it's a very lucrative market for exporters. Every country wants to trade with India. They also want to utilize India's young and skilled workforce. Another reason is hard power. India ranks 4th in the Global Firepower Index. It is also a nuclear-armed military. Would you want this country on your side or against you? I think the answer is obvious. The third reason is the focus on the Indo-Pacific. China's intentions became clear in the last decade. They wanted to rewrite the world order. So most countries started looking for alternatives, whether it's for supply chains or investments or military partnerships. Enter India, a stable democracy, a rising economy, and most importantly, a peace-loving country. Which is why India is a cornerstone of Western Indo-Pacific policy. Now to the final question. How do you capitalize on this position? If you're friends with everyone, what do? A, look for gains on both sides, and B, bridge the gap between these different camps. We saw an example of that at last year's G20 summit. India lobbied to include the African Union in the group of 20. It was probably the highlight of that summit. We're also seeing examples in Ukraine and West Asia. India has offered to mediate between the two sides to end the fighting once and for all. Plus, unlike China or the US, India doesn't have a vested interest. It is a broker without bias. Like I said, this is a unique position. It's not just neutrality, it's not just strategic autonomy, it is active engagement on all sides. And India did not stumble upon this sweet spot. It was cultivated by design. Last year, Prime Minister Modi laid out his foreign policy vision. He said India would be a Vishwamitra, meaning a friend to the world. Foreign Minister Jaishankar later expanded on it. He said India wanted to be a bridging power, and we are seeing that play out live now. India is a bridge between Russia and the West, between Iran and Israel, between BRICS and the G7. It is a unique position to be in, and it's important to capitalize on it, to harness the geopolitical dividend for India. Mohammad Yunus has a blank page in front of him, the chance to give Bangladesh a fresh start. But he's not reaching for a pen. He's turning back the pages. Yunus is more interested in erasing Bangladesh's past and, by extension, its identity. We saw an attempt on Wednesday. Yunus banned the student wing of Sheikh Hasina's party. Her party is called the Awami League. The student wing is the Bangladesh Chhatra League, or the BCL. The Yunus government accused them of murder, torture and rape. He used anti-terror laws to ban the BCL, And he's not done yet. There is speculation that Awami League could be next. Sheikh Hasina's party could be next to be banned. Yunus's advisors have already dropped hints.
Those who had taken part in the last 3 elections and come to parliament illegally deceive the people, and the interim government will of course put obstacles to their political participation. You will see how these barriers will come into effect.
To give you some background, Awami League is not just Sheikh Hasina's party, it is the Party of Liberation, the oldest political party in Bangladesh. It was founded in 1949, in Dhaka. The idea was to push back against West Pakistan's dominance, to protect the Bengali identity in the East. I'm sure you know what happened next. The Awami League led the liberation struggle. Under Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's leadership, they came to power after 1971. So the Awami League is not just a party, it is an institution, one that goes way beyond Sheikh Hasina and her family. Then why is Mohammad Yunus thinking about banning it? Because of student protesters, the same ones who toppled Hasina. They are part of a group called Anti-Discrimination Student Movement. They got the Chhatra League banned. Now they want the Awami League banned. The question is, will Mohammad Yunus give in? There's a good chance that he will. You see, Yunus is not an elected head of state. He was picked by the student protesters, meaning he owes his position to them. If they ask him to ban Awami League, how long can he resist? If he disagrees, they can always swap him out. So Yunus has boxed himself in. When he was appointed, he talked about change, about Bangladesh 2.0. But his actions suggest otherwise. He has cancelled public holidays linked to the liberation. He has banned the Chhatra League, and next he could ban the Awami League. This does not sound like progress. It sounds like revenge, like revision of history. And frankly, it's sad to see. The liberation war happened more than 5 decades ago. Most of these students did not live through it. They were born in liberated Bangladesh. Clearly, that's a factor here. They don't have the same emotions linked to Sheikh Mujib or his party, the Awami League. We saw that during the protests in August when students vandalized the statue of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. But that's a factor. It's not an excuse. For Sheikh Hasina, a ban would make things a lot worse. No party offices, no ground presence, no candidates if elections are held tomorrow. It could be a deadly blow to her. Just look at what's happening in Pakistan. Imran Khan's party, the PTI, was banned by Islamabad. Since then, he's struggled to gain momentum. As long as you have a party, you have hope. You have people fighting for you. If your party is banned, things become twice as difficult. I'm sure Sheikh Hasina knows that. She came to India nearly 2 months ago. A new report has details on her whereabouts. Apparently, Sheikh Hasina is living in the Lutyens Bungalow zone. This is a special area in New Delhi. It houses government ministers and lawmakers. New Delhi arranged this residence for her. Reports say she also takes occasional walks at the Lodi Garden, of course under intense security. Now, Hasina's stay is a problem for India, especially with the way things are going in Dhaka. A court has issued an arrest warrant for her. She's been ordered to appear by the 18th of November. Just one problem though, India doesn't seem interested in extraditing her. And chances are there will be a standoff because Bangladesh has promised a strong protest if New Delhi denies. Like I said, none of this looks like Bangladesh 2.0. It looks like a campaign of retribution. Now let's discuss India and China. It has been a significant week for the two neighbors. On Monday, India announced a deal to end the border standoff. 2 days ago, Prime Minister Modi met Xi Jinping in Russia, and today, the disengagement has finally begun. Indian and Chinese troops are pulling back from the last flashpoints. Reports say the disengagement actually began on Monday itself. It is expected to be completed by Tuesday next week. Now, this is definitely a positive development. It could pave the way for further normalization of ties. But India remains cautious. Our next report explains why.
It has been an eventful week for India-China relations. The deal on the border and the bilateral between the leaders has certainly brought the temperature down. Both sides are now making rapid strides towards normalization on the border. Reports say the troop withdrawal is now underway. Soldiers are pulling back from the last two flashpoints. That's Depsang Plains and Demchok. They were two of the most volatile areas. There, the troops were locked in an eyeball-to-eyeball standoff. Today, China confirmed the withdrawal is underway.
According to the recently agreed solution between India and China on border-related issues, the frontline armies of both sides are implementing relevant work, with smooth progress so far.
India has confirmed the pullback as well. The Indian Army's northern commander said disengagement is underway. Reports say it could be completed before the end of this month. New Delhi continues to closely monitor the border situation. The troop withdrawal couldn't have come at a better time. It's happening just before the harsh winter sets in. During winters, temperatures drop to as low as -20 degrees Celsius in eastern Ladakh. Breathing also becomes difficult considering the high altitude. For the past 4 years, Indian soldiers have braved this difficult environment to keep the border safe. These deployments are costly for the Indian exchequer as well. The cost of keeping just one soldier on this front is at least 10 lakhs every year. That's almost $12,000. So the disengagement is welcome news. But India cannot take China's claims at face value. It must confirm any claims of a pullback with tangible evidence on the ground. India remains cautious on the economic front as well. Disengagement could lead to stronger trade and economic links with China. It could pave the way for New Delhi to resume direct flights to China. It could even start issuing visas to Chinese professionals more quickly. But India is in no hurry to reverse existing policies just yet. When it comes to China, a serious trust deficit remains. Earlier this week, Prime Minister Modi met with Xi Jinping in Russia. He personally stressed the importance of restoring trust.
Mutual trust, mutual respect और mutual sensitivity हमारे संबंधों का आधार बने रहना चाहिए.
So far, China appears to be keeping its commitment on the border front. But when it comes to resolving the trust issues with India, there's still a long way to go.
I understand from listening to people across the Commonwealth how the most painful aspects of our past continue to resonate.
My focus is on the forward look, not the sort of backward look.
Now let's turn our attention to Samoa. It's an island nation in the Pacific Ocean, so of course it was once subjugated by a European power. In this case, the colonizer was the UK. That is why today, Samoa is a member of the Commonwealth of Nations. It's actually the host country for this year's Commonwealth Summit, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. The meeting is being presided over by Britain's King Charles III. Charles was having a great time over the last few days, drinking a potent Samoan brew, a drink called kava. Charles was even declared a high chief of the Samoan archipelago. Yes, he did seem to enjoy all the empire nostalgia, but he came crashing back down to earth earlier today.
Our cohesion requires that we acknowledge where we have come from. I understand from listening to people across the Commonwealth how the most painful aspects of our past continue to resonate. It is vital, therefore, that we understand our history to guide us to make the right choices in the future.
Charles seemed to have sobered up this morning. He needed his wits about him so he could deflect from a contentious issue at this Commonwealth Summit, the issue of reparations. As you know, Britain was a pioneer back in the day, a real trailblazer when it came to slavery. Slavery had always existed in human history, But Britain, and the British monarchy in particular, transformed it into a truly global business. The UK set up a slave code for its Caribbean colonies. They enslaved people in Africa, forced them into ships, and took them to plantations in the Caribbean. Millions perished during the brutal journey. And those who survived were worked to death on the plantations. The British royal family was heavily involved in slavery. They granted monopolies to slavers, provided ships. The previous Charles II, even founded the Royal African Company, Britain's biggest slave trading institution. Now, obviously, the British royal family was not doing any of it for free. They took a hefty cut of the profits. How hefty? We can't be sure of that. They've never been forthcoming with their finances. But considering the timeline, it is entirely possible that the Buckingham Palace itself was built using slavery profits. So the current Charles may literally be living in a house of blood. Today, Charles said that we should understand history. Well, this is the history. The British royal family continues to live in luxury thanks to the millions it made in the slave trade centuries ago. That is a fact. But here's Charles trying to sidestep the issue.
None of us can change the past, but we can commit with all our hearts to learning its lessons and to finding creative ways to right inequalities that endure.
Creative ways? Are you joking? How about going the simple way instead? Just pay reparations, sell all your fancy cars, cloaks and tiaras, and right the past wrongs. The British royal family will never agree to this, but sadly, neither will the British government.
I think we should be clear from the outset that the slave trade, slave practice was abhorrent. And it's very important that we start from that place. And of course, that matters hugely to many of the countries that are represented here. The question then is, where do we go from there? Now, my posture, if you like, is that we should be forward-looking. That's my posture, if you like, my focus is on the forward look, not the sort of backward look.
That was the UK's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. He just flatly refused to pay reparations. Everyone in his cabinet is of the same view. They may offer some token, non-cash forms of justice, but no reparations, not even a formal apology. That is the British government's official stance. But there is still some hope. The Commonwealth is choosing its new Secretary General at this summit, and all the candidates have vowed to pursue reparations. Despite Britain's objections, slavery reparations will probably get mentioned in the summit's final communique. And next year, Commonwealth members from the Caribbean plan to send a delegation to the UK with an updated list of demands. There's no guarantee that any of this will change the UK's position, but it is a step in the right direction. In the United States, as the election draws closer, it's become a battle of star power. In Texas, Kamala Harris will be joined by Beyonce. She will help the Democratic candidate get her message out in the red state. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is courting another star, podcaster Joe Rogan. He's America's biggest podcaster with millions of followers, and the Republicans aim to capitalize on that. Now, star power has long been a part of US elections, or any election for that matter, but does it really help? Do celebrity endorsements actually help sway elections? If not, why do parties call them to campaign? Our next report tells you.
On Friday, Kamala Harris will be in Texas, visiting the reddest of the red states to highlight the abortion problem in the state. But she won't be on stage alone. Backing her there will be superstar Beyonce. The Democrats already have a list of star-studded endorsements, from Taylor Swift to Stevie Wonder, even Eminem. Beyonce's presence will be the cherry on top of the cake. Meanwhile, Donald Trump will woo the audience of another star, Joe Rogan. His podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, was the world's most listened to podcast in 2023. It has 17.5 million subscribers on YouTube. So, Trump aims to capitalize on that, to get Rogan's approval as Election Day draws closer. Celebrity endorsements like this are not new. Star power has long been a part of US presidential elections. In 1920, singer Al Jolson wrote a song exclusively to endorse Warren G. Harding. The song was called Harding, You Are the Man for Us. Harding later became the 29th President of the United States. In 1960, American singer Frank Sinatra endorsed John F. Kennedy. He said, "Jack's got what all the rest lack." His band member Sammy Davis, however, had different thoughts. He was rooting for Richard Nixon in that race. Legendary boxer Muhammad Ali was a fan of Ronald Reagan. In 1980, he backed him in the presidential race. However, the biggest endorsement of all came in 2008. It was Oprah Winfrey for Barack Obama. This was her first political endorsement ever. Her support gave him national recognition. By some estimates, her endorsement won Obama over 1 million votes. But not all endorsements have been successful. In 2012, Clint Eastwood endorsed Mitt Romney. Romney ended up losing the race. Then there was Beyonce and Jay-Z for Hillary Clinton in 2016. The aim was to mobilize African American voters. Yet Clinton still lost the election. The most high-profile endorsement of this season came from Taylor Swift. In 2020, she backed Joe Biden. And this time too, she has rallied behind the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris. She posted a link to vote.gov, which is a website to register for voting. The site got 405,000 visitors in a day. Does that mean Swift has helped sway the elections in the favor of the Democrats? It's hard to say. 405,000 people may have visited the site, but we don't know if they registered to vote. Also, the impact celebrity endorsements have is not often quantifiable. Yes, they do have an influence, but they're unlikely to sway voters from their key beliefs. In 2020, 89% of American adults said that they wouldn't change their vote because of a celebrity endorsement. And research backs this up. Celebrity endorsements often don't determine an election result. Hi, everyone. Then what explains the flurry of star power? Well, it's to capitalize on the young voters. At least 19% of them say a celebrity can influence their decision. So the idea is to get your message across to that voter base. As politics continues to intersect with pop culture, one thing is clear. The power of fame is here to stay. In the end, it's up to voters to decide if the spotlight of stardom will guide their choices at the ballot box.
And that president is Kamala Harris.
India Inc. has a new complaint, especially the folks from FMCG companies. They say India's middle class is shrinking. I know it sounds very alarming, so let me explain. First of all, FMCG stands for fast-moving consumer goods. We're talking about things like packaged milk or daily cosmetics or beverages or food items, basically things that sell off fast and cheap, hence fast-moving. Hindustan Unilever is the biggest FMCG company in India, followed by ITC and Nestle. Most of them reported their quarterly earnings recently. The top bosses talked about a consumption rut. Look at the managing director of Nestle India. He said that India's middle class is shrinking, which is why consumer spending is stuck. Now, Nestle is pretty big in India. They have a market capitalization of $3 billion. So coming from them, it's a serious warning. And it's not just Nestle. Tata Consumer Products had a similar assessment. They said the urban market is slowing down. Colgate also highlighted what they called difficult market situations. Now, all of this raises a couple of questions. One, is it just FMCG? And two, what is the state of India's middle class? Is it really shrinking? Well, the answer to the first question is no, it's not just FMCG. India's auto sector is also struggling with sluggish demand. In September, car sales dropped again. The third straight month of falling sales. It dropped 2.5% in July, 1.8% in August, and between 1 and 2.5% in September. Remember, this is leading up to India's festival season. If sales are down now, it suggests a problem. Which brings us to the second question. Does this mean India's middle class is shrinking? Well, first of all, who constitutes the middle class? I'm afraid there is no fixed definition. Just look at this Indian think tank called Price. For them, middle class is between 1.09 lakh rupees and 6.4 lakh rupees per year. If your income is in this bracket, then you are middle class. In 2021, that included 432 million Indians. By 2031, it is projected to reach 700 million Indians. So that's nearly half of the country, middle class. But Pew Research has a different approach. They said only 66 million Indians were middle class after the pandemic, which is just about 5% of all Indians. Do you see the difference here? Your number will depend on your threshold, which is why calculating the middle class is a tough task. Instead, let's look at consumption. Are Indians spending less than before, especially urban Indians? The answer is yes. Let me quote the Finance Ministry's assessment in September. This is the Union Finance Ministry. They said, urban consumption shows some signs of weakness evident in the decline in automobile sales. So consumption is down. But do we know why? Why is it down? For starters, the backlog is over. A lot of Indians delayed their purchases during the pandemic, whether it's cars or gadgets or real estate, but now it's late 2024. Most of that pent-up demand is gone, so the spending appears muted. Secondly, cost of living concerns remain. India's central bank is wary of it. The US Federal Reserve has started cutting interest rates, but the RBI is holding off. They say we can't afford another round of inflation. If the rates are cut, loans could become cheaper, and cheaper loans equals more spending. We haven't reached that stage yet. The third reason is a change in consumption patterns. Yes, FMCG companies are struggling, but Indians are now spending elsewhere, like on concert tickets or cricket matches or travel. Plus, they're not spending as much on, say, sugary drinks or chocolates. They like healthier alternatives, which most FMCG firms do not make. At least the big multinational ones don't. So it's not time to panic yet. The government says things will pick up soon, especially once public spending kicks in. Also, the macroeconomic indicators look solid, the GDP growth and trade. The good thing is the Finance Ministry has acknowledged the sluggish demand. The next step is fixing it. Now let's turn to the war in West Asia. You know that Israel has been at war for over a year now. It started with Gaza, Israel versus Hamas. Then last month the battlefield expanded. Israel is now inside Lebanon. They have boots on the ground in southern Lebanon. They keep bombing the capital Beirut, and Hezbollah keeps firing missiles on Israeli cities. But that is not all. As we track this conflict, we often overlook the third active frontier, the one to the south, where Yemen's Houthi rebel group is waging a wider war on global shipping. The Houthis have been attacking ships sailing through the Red Sea. They began their attacks just days after the October 7th attack on Israel. The group claims that this is in support of the Palestinians in Gaza. So they too are fighting against Israel. And now a new report has come out which claims that the Houthis are getting help from Russia. The report says that Russia gave the Houthis satellite data, which was used to attack ships. Apparently, this information came from 3 sources, but the report does not name them. And this isn't the first time something like this has come up. Last month, there was a different report which said that Russia is keen to sell anti-ship missiles to the Houthis and that Iran was facilitating this deal. Again, this information allegedly came from unnamed sources. So that's a lot of accusations involving all major Western rivals. Before we go any further, let's take a closer look at the Houthi situation. The Houthi rebel group controls vast swathes of Yemen. It is ruling the country de facto. Even though it doesn't have international recognition, the Houthis are backed by Iran. They're part of Iran's so-called axis of resistance. The Houthis have been actively fighting Israel, but through indirect means. Barring the random drone or missile attack, the Houthis don't focus on the Israeli mainland. Instead, they target global shipping. They say that they only target ships with ties to Israel, either Israeli-owned vessels or ships that are transporting goods to Israel. But that has not always been the case. Other vessels have also been caught in the crossfire. Over the last year, the Houthis have attacked more than 100 ships. They've managed to sink 2 of them and hijack 1. This may not be the greatest win ratio, but the Houthis have been extremely successful in their primary goal, wrecking international trade. That's what they've done. Look at these numbers. In October last year, the global freight rate for one container was about $1,300. But then the Houthis began their attacks. By January, freight rates rose to about $4,000 per container. By July, they hit $5,900. That's where they reached. That's a four-time jump, 4 times higher than last October. Ships have been avoiding the Red Sea for a year now. In August, traffic was 77% lower than it was last October. Ships are now taking longer routes to avoid Houthi attacks, and that drives up costs. These added costs eventually trickle down to ordinary people and make the cost of living crisis worse. So Western nations are furious about this. The US even formed a coalition to tackle the Houthi threat. Along with the UK, they've been bombing Houthi installations. Last week, they even unleashed the B-2 stealth bombers on the Houthis. So even though you don't hear about the Houthis often, they are still a major threat. Now back to the latest report. It says that Russia is aiding the Houthis with satellite data. It's very convenient for the Western narrative. All of their rivals just happen to be working together to the detriment of the whole world. But why would Russia risk its own trade? The report goes directly against what Russian President Vladimir Putin said yesterday.
We are very concerned about what is happening in the region, and no matter what anyone says, Russia is not interested in the conflict getting worse. Strategically, we will not gain anything from this. We will only see additional problems.
So as usual, it's the West's word against Putin's. Who you believe is up to you. But one thing is certain, the Red Sea situation continues to affect all of us. Our next story is about a rape in France. It's a story we've told you before. It's heinous, it's disturbing, it will unsettle you. But it is important to talk about it, to inform the world, to expose some myths about rape. At the center of this case is 72-year-old Gisèle Pellicot. She lived with her husband in Mazan, a town in northeast France. They were apparently a happy couple. They had grandchildren. But in 2020, all of it changed. Gisèle discovered a secret that rocked her life. For a decade, her husband had drugged her, raped her, and even invited other men to rape her. She was raped 92 times by 72 men. And Gisèle had no clue. That's how heavily drugged she was. That's how heavily sedated she was by her husband. For years, she kept losing her hair and weight. She started forgetting days. Her husband called it hysteria. The doctor said it could be Alzheimer's. But no one knew the real reason, the horrors that she was being subjected to. This case is now in court. Her husband and 50 other men are on trial. The hearings are public. Now, usually the victim of a case like this is anonymous. They are not named. But Gisèle decided to speak out because she wants to change the norm. She says it is not a rape survivor who should feel shame. It is the rapists who should be ashamed.
I wanted all women victims of rape, not just when they have been drugged. Rape exists at all levels. I want those women to say, Mrs. Pellicot did it, we can do it too. When you're raped, there is shame, and it's not for us to have shame. It's for them.
It's a difficult thing to do, to stand in court and face your rapists, to look them in the eye, to hear the details again and again. But Gisèle is doing it. She wants to set an example for all rape survivors. And it's turned her into an unlikely hero in France. She says her only purpose is to show that rapists are not some strangers in the shadows. They are people we know in our daily lives. In this case, it was her husband and the men he invited.
The profile of a rapist is not someone met in a car park late at night. A rapist can also be in the family, among our friends. When I saw one of the accused on the stand last week who came into my bedroom and house without consent, this man who came to rape an unconscious 57-year-old woman. I am also a mother and grandmother. I could have been his grandmother.
In 2023, France registered 114,000 victims of sexual violence, 114,000. 25,000 were reported rape. Yet most rapes in the country go unreported. Do you know why? Because of shame. 80% women often do not press charges. 1 in 3 women globally have experienced physical or sexual violence. Yet the cases reported are far lesser, and this trial is not just about the vile acts, it's about how they are committed. Her husband doing it was bad enough, but the fact that he found 90 more men, complete strangers, to rape his wife talks about a bigger problem: the systemic nature of abuse. Pellico's husband used chat rooms and pornographic content. He invited men who willingly participated. These men came from all walks of life, from soldiers to truck drivers, even a journalist and a nurse. Most of them were either married or in a relationship. Some of them even had children. That's what makes this story even more chilling. These men felt entitled to violate a woman. Many of them claimed they thought Giselle was a willing participant. She was lying there, heavily sedated. Yet they did not think her consent mattered. And pornography plays a role here. Police say Pellico's husband had a laptop with multiple videos of asleep porn. Apparently it's a thing. Videos of unconscious women being assaulted. These were the acts that these rapists consumed online, and in real life it distorted the lines between fantasy and reality for them. It tells you how media feeds a culture that trivializes or erases consent altogether. None of this makes these men less guilty, but the Giselle Pellico trial has laid bare some dangerous myths that society tells us about rape. Rape is not just a crime of strangers. It happens in private, supposedly safe spaces, in homes. Often the rapists are the people we know, partners, friends, acquaintances. As the trial continues, we don't know what justice will look like for Giselle, but this story is about more than one woman. It's about all women. It's about the culture that allows men to feel entitled to women's bodies and the systems that fail to protect us. Our last story tonight is about space. For long, the space industry was controlled by governments across the globe. But countries are now opening up, the industry is now opening up. Governments are involving more and more private players, trying to boost innovation. And India is no different. Today, India approved a capital fund for startups. It's worth 1,000 crore rupees. That's around $119 million. This fund will support 35 to 40 space startups. The idea is to help them in the initial stage to make sure that their plan is ready for takeoff. How will this fund work? Will private startups dominate the space race in the future? Our next report has the answers.
India's space program is only 62 years old. The ISRO was set up in 1962. India was a young nation-state. It had pressing economic and military challenges, but that didn't stop it from dreaming big. In 1963, India launched its first rocket into space. We were no match for other world powers then. The US and then Soviet Union were far ahead of India. But in the last 6 decades, that story has changed. India has now joined the elite club. It's a key player in the space race. And now it's empowering space startups to revolutionize the sector. Today, the cabinet approved a 1,000 crore rupee venture capital fund for the space sector. It's to boost the startup ecosystem. The initial plan is to help 35 to 40 startups. Each startup will receive anything between rupees 10 to rupees 60 crore. That depends on what stage of development they are on and how it could change India's space industry. Why does India need this fund now? Because the government believes the sector lacks capital. For startups like this, capital in the initial stage can make or break their initiative. Plus, it's a time-consuming business, from designing a satellite to launching one. An initiative like this takes years. The profit only flows when the entire process is done. Usually, traditional investors are wary of funding such a sector, especially when there are no returns for a long time. So the government wants to plug in that gap, and it's crucial. Because India's space economy is worth over $8 billion, the plan is to reach $44 billion by 2033. In 2020, India opened up its space sector for private firms. Since then, there have been over 250 startups. They are allowed to build rockets. They even have access to ISRO's launching facilities. And India is not alone in this. Several countries are mixing public and private sectors in the space industry. NASA collaborates with private companies such as SpaceX, Blue Origin and Boeing. The European Space Agency works with private companies like Airbus and Arianespace. China is slowly opening up its space industry to private firms, and so is Russia. It's because space is increasingly becoming a competitive arena for geopolitical influence. Countries want to ensure that they don't fall behind in this crucial sector. Involving private companies boosts national space capabilities without putting all the responsibility on state-run organizations. So India wants to capitalize on that. Private space startups in the country are aiming for the stars. But this fund could act as a launchpad to help them shoot off.
Our joke tonight is from Canada, where Justin Trudeau is facing a lot of heat, both from abroad and at home, and looks like the pressure has finally broken him, or at least his vocabulary. Canada's parliament is currently in session. Trudeau was sparring with his opposite number, Pierre Poilievre. He wanted to say that the opposition had a broken vision for Canada, but instead of broken, he said brokenness, which of course is not a word. The opposition leader then roasted Trudeau in parliament, after which social media took it up. I know it's an honest mistake, but when you're in the middle of a domestic and international scandal, there is no mercy. Take a look.
Again, Mr. Speaker, we see the Leader of the Opposition pushing a brokenist vision of Canada that is simply not aligned with the reality.
Mr. Speaker, brokenist. It's not even a word. He's even breaking the English language. Oh, my goodness.
That Russia must win this war. That Ukraine must win this war against Russia. Damn! On the occasion of 90 years of diplomatic relations between Canada and China, Canada and Japan.
And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. Rare rainfall leads to abnormal flooding in the Sahara Desert in Morocco. Cyclone Dana makes landfall in India, triggering strong winds and torrential rains. And party animals put on their best costumes for the fantasy pet masquerade. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1955, the first microwave designed for domestic use went on sale. Microwaves were born from radar systems used in the Second World War. The first microwave sold for over $1,000 in the US, making it unaffordable for most people. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.
see Leo and Gustavo from Key West. Spent a lot of time on this, obviously. The Baywatch people. I'm just saying. All right! Good enough for Winnie and the whole crew here. No. And please give it up for Carolyn for that wonderful rendition of this.
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election, explains how America chooses its president, your primer on the race to the White House, everything you need to know about how America votes, and its global implications. U.S. Election Explained, every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.